You know that feeling, right? That suffocating weight right in the middle of your chest when you're forced to make a big decision? It's this tense, chronic anxiety. Literally, the absolute terror of making the wrong choice. It leaves us completely paralyzed by decision fatigue. Honestly, we all feel it. But what if I told you that this anxiety isn't actually about the decision at all? Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're unpacking a deeply profound, totally paradigm-shifting framework ideated by Amir Mohamad Ardalan. And trust me, it's going to completely change how you view your own mind, your fears, and honestly, your whole place in the universe.
So, why exactly do we demand the power of a God just to make a choice? Let's dive into this, because it hits right at the core of our existential dread. A lot of times, we just brush off decision-making paralysis as, a simple inability to decide, like a cognitive glitch. But this framework flips that completely on its head. It argues that this paralysis is actually a grandiose, narcissistic rebellion against our own human finitude. We are limited, fragile beings, right? Yet we unconsciously demand the omnipotent power of a God just to make a simple choice. We expect ourselves to flawlessly predict the future. It's wild when you really think about it.
This brings us to the concept of yaqeen, which translates to absolute certainty. The author points out that this impossible demand for total foresight is actually the cognitive fingerprint of the narcissistic wound. It's like we've signed this magical, unspoken contract with reality, where any ambiguity, any uncertainty at all, is viewed as a personal defect, like a failure of the self. We tell ourselves, if I just think hard enough, if I just analyze enough data, I can control the outcome. But here's the thing, to be human is to operate with incomplete data in a radically, incredibly complex world.
Now, this epistemic grandiosity, this intense demand to know the unknowable, well, it doesn't just sit quietly in the background. It actually manifests into two very distinct and frankly, very painful behavioral patterns.
So on one side, we have the functional narcissist, and these folks are entirely a slave to the outcome. Their entire self-worth is desperately anchored in winning tangible external prizes, wealth, status, absolute victory. For them, a bad result isn't just a bummer, it's existential annihilation. And on the flip side, we have the moral narcissist. They are a slave to virtue. They aren't chasing money. Instead, they demand the validation of being on the absolute, infallible right side of history and ethics. They essentially divide the whole world into stark binaries of pure and evil, mostly just to soothe their own internal anxiety.
But here is the crucial point. Despite their differences, both of these subtypes share a profound delusion. They absolutely refuse to accept incomplete data. They are utterly intolerant of the dark unknown, and they cling, for dear life, to the illusion of absolute judgment. To them, human reality isn't probabilistic. Instead, they turn life into either a frantic, high-stakes casino or this rigid, unforgiving court of condemnation. And man, the pressure of living like that is just unbearable.
But what if we just changed the question? Instead of agonizing and asking, will I be perfectly right, what if you asked yourself this? Can I defend my action to my future self based on the data I had and the honesty I could muster? Just sit with that for a second. Notice how that shifts the entire weight of the world right off your shoulders. It's such a profound breath of fresh air. We're moving our focus entirely away from an outcome we can't possibly plan for and anchoring it strictly to the integrity of our own process.
And this massive shift brings us to the concept of Hujjah. The author introduces this truly masterful conceptual migration, taking Hujjah from the rigid boundaries of Islamic jurisprudence and applying it directly to our everyday existential philosophy. See, Hujjah doesn't mean objective, absolute truth. It means defensible justification. It's this profound, liberating realization that we are not asked for omniscience. The universe doesn't demand that we play God. It only asks us for responsible diligence, using the tools we actually have right now. Which leads us to the ultimate cure here, ego process trust. By pivoting away from the outcome and focusing entirely on the process, failure completely loses its sting. Just think about how liberating that is. Your self-evaluation is no longer tied to whether you won the gamble of the future. No, it's tied to your procedural integrity in the present. You can actually trust your process, knowing full well that a negative result no longer equals a flawed, defective view.
So let's look at how this therapeutic antidote applies to those two archetypes we talked about earlier. For the functional narcissist, they get to replace their frantic obsession with results with a quiet, dignified rigor. They finally step out of the existential casino and become, dignified explorers. And for the moral narcissist, they replace their rigid dogma with epistemic humility. They trade in all that self-righteousness for authentic, humble accountability. They accept that their judgment is really just a defensible approximation, not the literal voice of God.
All of this leads us to an incredibly powerful, almost cinematic metaphor to tie this whole framework together. I decided in the dark, but with the very lamp I could have in my hands. I really want you to picture that visually for a second. A heavy, opaque fog of the unknown future. And it's pierced only by the small, warm light of the single lamp you're holding. You don't need to light up the whole forest. You just need enough light for the very next step. This is the beautiful, liberating shift, abandoning the agonizing anxiety of having to be perfectly right and finally embracing the serene peace of being deeply honest.
As we wrap up this explainer, I really want you to reflect on the dignity of your own finite self. Life is not some torturous competition for perfect prediction. It is about navigating the mist with courage. This paradigm we've explored today, which once again was ideated by Amir Mohamad Ardalan, it leaves us with such a profound realization. Peace isn't found in a guaranteed perfect future. Real peace, it's found right here, in the dark, responsibly holding your lamp. So the next time you find yourself paralyzed by a choice, ask yourself, are you going to keep demanding the impossible power of a god, or will you just pick up your lamp and take the next step?